today I'm going to do at least one, maybe two teachings on the feasts of the Lord. And I actually did videos on this, but I didn't really like how they came out because they were not as put together as I wanted them to be. So we're going to do it here. And the feasts of the Lord are something that you could be in an organized church till you're 70 and never hear about, which is sad because they have a lot of importance, as I'm going to show you in the next few minutes. First off, if this is going to be more detailed than you're going to know for sure, but it's not as detailed as if you wanted to study it out. And if you wanted to study it out, you could do that. There are plenty of websites that outline some of the details. And I would just say this to you: if you're studying it from a website or whatever, if the website uses certain names of months like Nisan, Tishri, I would shy away from those, because God never named a month. God calls the months first month, second month, third month, fourth month, etc. The name Tishri and Nisan, they come from when the house of Judah was taken into Babylonian captivity for 70 years. And when they came back out of captivity, they brought many Babylonian cultures and traditions with them. And it's never a good thing to have anything Babylonian. And so when teachers teach, it proves that they're not being careful with their words. And they're saying things that men say, not what God says. So I would shy away from that. Secondly, I would shy away if they call them Jewish feasts or the feasts of Israel. And this is why the organized church, they would think that they are those, but they're not. And that's why they don't teach them. But God calls them, He says, these are my feasts. Okay? So they're God's feasts. They're not anybody else's feasts. So, important point to show you. The word for feast is moed. And moed means appointed times. So what God says is, these are my appointed times. I got onto this probably 2008, maybe. And I was reading. I was going through the one-year Bible. I did that for years and years. And on January 1st, it starts back over in the Old Testament with Genesis, and it said these, and it was evening and it was morning the first day. And I just thought, Lord, that's backwards. And it led me into months and months of digging and research, and I ended up having some great teachers. If you wanted to know, I read a book called The Feast of Tabernacles by George Warnock. And all of his teachings are online, and I went through all of those. And he's actually really good. But these are the feasts of the Lord. And I believe, and I think it's clear, that the feasts of the Lord are God's calendar. and which makes it very relevant for you to grasp. And I'm going to show you some things about that will change your perspective and make you realize that this is something that has some importance to it. Okay, so let me say this here. God is not stupid enough to start his year in the dead middle of winter. And God didn't start his year in the dead middle of winter. God's year starts in somewhere around our March, April time frame. As I've said many times to you, you live in a world of deception. And much of the deception is done and accomplished through religion. Okay. And I'm going to show you this, and you'll think this is pretty cool. And if I can assure you, you would never know it unless you've talked to me about this before. Our first months in the deception world, our first 8 months are named after Roman gods. January, Janus, all the way to August, which is after Augustus Caesar. But then here's the vestige of truth for you. September. Well, if you, it's our 9th month, right? But if you have septuplets, you had 7 children. October, it's our 10th month, but an octagon has 8 sides. An octopus has 8 tentacles. November, neve means 9, even though it's our 11th month. And December, it's our 12th month, but a decade is 10 years. There's your truth about what the months really are. Okay? So let's go through. God had set appointed times to meet with them. And in the first month, again, which would be what we consider 4th month, somewhere late 3rd, mid 3rd, is the first month. And there was a feast day on the 14th day of the first month. And it was called Passover. You're familiar with that. That is surrounding Jesus' crucifixion. And I'm going to say this now because some of this and a lot of it ties back to the Israelites in Egypt and in the wilderness. But when they were in Egypt, Passover was the day that they put the lamb's blood above their doorpost. And that night, let me first go back. Remember I said evening and morning the first day. God's day starts at sunset, and it runs through sunset the next day. So we might view some events as happening over 2 days. But in this, everything happens in 1 day, as I'm going to show you. Passover. That night, the angel of the Lord came through and slew all of the firstborn sons in Egypt because they didn't have the blood over the doorpost. He would have slain every one of the Israelites' firstborn if they had not had the blood. He passed over. Well, in the morning, when the Egyptians woke up and they realized that their firstborn children were all dead, they wanted the Israelites out of there. And so the Israelites pilfered them. They they asked for and got their gold, their silver, their jewelry, all of that stuff. And the Egyptians wanted them gone so badly that they gave it to them. Y'all get out of here. And so they left. All of this happened on one day, Passover. The next day after Passover is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it's a 7-day feast. And it's important to understand that the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread was a high Sabbath day. We'll get to that, and you'll see why that's important. Probably not in this video, but in the next one to come. That went for 7 days. In the middle of that 7-day feast, on the first day of the week, so it could have been on the third day of the feast, of that 7-day feast, it could have been on the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, just depending on when the first day of the week fell. It was first fruits. And first fruits is when the priest would wave the crop in front of God, and they would ask that God give them a bountiful crop just like the first fruit. Okay, that'll be important in the crucifixion of Jesus, because you're going to see some higher truth that you haven't seen before. Now, 50 days from first fruits, which would put it on the 50th day from first fruits, would be the feast called Pentecost. And there are ties between Pentecost in the wilderness and Pentecost right after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And Pentecost means 50, so it's 50 days after first fruits. The fall feast, so that encompasses the spring feasts and then goes to Pentecost. And then the fall feast happened in the 7th month. And on the first day of the 7th month is the Feast of Trumpets. And the Feast of Trumpets is a 1-day feast. But 10 days after that, you have the Day of Jubilee. The Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement was a solemn day where they fasted and they did these things because that's the day the high priest went into the Holy of Holies and spread the blood of the Lamb. And God forgave their sins for another year. He deferred them. So it was a special day. Now, every 50 years, this is untaught, but it was untaught through Christianity. But every 50 years, the Day of Atonement became a Jubilee. And in the year of Jubilee, all the debts were forgiven. So if you'd been sold into slavery because you didn't have enough, you had debts and you couldn't pay them, you went free on the 50th year. And there's also a thing, and I don't have time to get into it right now, but it would be very important for you to understand that you could be redeemed early if you had a kinsman redeemer. I'll probably have an entire study on that. Kinsman redeemer. You could be redeemed by your kinsman redeemer before the Jubilee. But even if you didn't, the Jubilee, your debts were going to be forgiven. This is a type and shadow of how come, regardless of anything that happened, God's plan was always to forgive the debts of everyone. So, but he had something better also. So, then on the 15th day of the 7th month began the Feast of Tabernacles. And Tabernacles is the Feast of Feasts, because it's God dwelling with us. So, those are the feasts of the Lord. The Feast of Tabernacles was a 7-day feast. Now I'm going to share this point with you in this one. Many people, Jesus was clearly not born on December 25th, even though probably 70 or 80% of the people who go to church regularly think he was. Again, nobody's careful with anything. And, it's mind-blowing a little bit, but Jesus was born in the 7th month. Now, some people believe he was born on the Feast of Trumpets, which would be the first day of the 7th month. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to fight with them. It's not what I believe, but I believe he was born on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, which would have been the 15th day of the 7th month. And I believe that because in John chapter 1, it talks about, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And that word for dwelt is tabernacled. So that's what I believe, that Jesus was born on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And I believe that he was presented in the temple on the 8th day, which the Feast of Tabernacles is 7 days. And then the 8th day is called the last great day. So that's what I believe. But again, clearly he was not born in December. That's a religious thing. That's a worldly thing, a mixture of all kinds of things, started by Constantine, the Roman emperor. He was trying to get Christians on his side. And so he mixed all these things together. And here we are 2,000 years later, still living in that lie. But we will get into some things that I think you'll find very interesting in the next video. I love you all.